Hey everybody, and welcome to this webinar where we are going to do a deep dive into the science-backed tips for boosting your online fundraising stores. So of course, as entrepreneurs, we always look to science, research, and data to help inform us and help to guide our business decision-making. So that said, we are going to, as the title of the webinar implies, we're going to look at what the science can inform us in terms of how we can get better fundraising results using online stores and, of course, using marketing messaging and some simple techniques. All right, so my agenda is very straightforward. We are going to examine the DIME fundraising model, and the DIME fundraising model stands for donation impact, motivation, and effort. We're also going to talk about the notion of social proofing to get more results for your fundraising customers by using social proofing, consensus, and the herd theory. Lastly, we'll conclude with how you can take advantage of the topics we're going to present today and how you can engineer those into your online fundraising store. So we'll talk about some best practices that you should consider when launching your online fundraising stores powered by InkSoft. All right, so as I typically do, whether it be a blog post or a webinar, I always like to start with bottom line up front. So this is what I hope to communicate. This is the essence of what we hope to achieve in today's webinar. So the bottom line up front today is the DIME framework, which we're going to present today. When you pair and couple that with branded products, so printed goods, as the fundraising device, you can amplify that with online fundraising stores to generate the best possible returns for your customer and, of course, their audience, their community, their group. So it's kind of a trifecta here. Again, the knowledge we're going to present today, when you pair that with decorated, embellished products, which are an amazing vehicle for fundraising because they provide multiple sort of utility, right? It helps to perpetuate the brand of the fundraising organization, their messaging, their vision, and it also provides something to an end consumer. They get something in return for their donation. And you'll see as we explore the DIME model how that has big implication. All right, so before we take action here, I really want to underscore one more point. Why this really matters and why you should take care to really consider the science that we're going to present today. And the reality is this, the returning effect. So we know that consumers now more than ever want to align with causes, with brands, with companies that share much in common with their sort of goals, maybe their ethics, their belief systems, their core values. So the reality is, by doing good for local communities and organizations through fundraising, doing good is good for business. There's a returning effect. I've heard some amazing success stories of clients launching online fundraising stores using InkSoft, and then other folks learning about fundraising programs and wanting to leverage that for their own organization. So there's sort of a network effect here, and it's a great way for you to generate other business opportunity. So again, the reality of offering fundraising as a strong part of your marketing mix is doing good is good for your business. All right, so let's jump in. I want to jump into a story, and this is an actual example, and we'll use this example as we progress through today's webinar. But the reality is, in 2014, if you can remember the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, do you remember that? So the Ice Bucket Challenge was a viral sort of phenomenon, and the premise of the Ice Bucket Challenge was, you were to be challenged by somebody in your social network to take the Ice Bucket Challenge, and you had to do so within, I believe it was 24 hours, right? And then once you completed the Ice Bucket Challenge, you would then in turn challenge somebody in your network. So it was a network effect, a viral spread, if you will. And look at the results of the Ice Bucket Challenge. In just 1 month, the ALS Foundation was able to generate $41.8 million from nearly 740,000 new donors, and that doubled the $19.4 million it received from the entire previous year. So obviously a major success. Now the DIME model, which we're going to present today, the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge is really a good case study for the DIME model. So I wanted to present this because we're going to come back and explore and really dig deep and showcase the value of the DIME model in context to the Ice Bucket Challenge. And ironic enough, I went back through my photo library and I found the photos for when the InkSoft team participated in the Ice Bucket Challenge in 2014. So we rented a dunk tank, filled it with ice water, and our team participated in the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. So we did it in a kind of a creative way. And here's Jared, one of our senior developers, still on the team. And you can see him taking a plunge, taking an ice bath in support of the Ice Bucket Challenge. So kind of an ironic and fun way to share a story there, right? All right, so let's move into the first component of the DIME fundraising model. And again, this is all science-backed. And we're going to take a look at donation impact as the first example. So let's take a look at another visual cue here. How many of you have seen an infomercial or a commercial, and I forgot the name of the organization, but I remember their sort of messaging, for less than 30 cents a day, you can help feed this child. So the reality is, and here's another example from Save the Children, donation impact tells us that, people take value in knowing they're making a specific difference. They're making an impact. So the reality is donors, they like to know that they made a very direct and specific impact. They made a difference. And by using a very specific example like this child who has a name and has a face, science tells us we're more likely to motivate somebody to take action. And compare that to a general example. Your donation can help feed children across the globe. Well, that's broad. That's hard to, really have a clear understanding of my impact. But when it's focused and made specific, it resonates with the human brain, right? Now, impact-focused fundraisers produce more results. In particular, science tells us that if we tell people the impact they are going to make with their donation or their support of a cause, that can increase their, charitable contribution or their giving by 2x, twofold. So we can get way more value and benefit for our customer, who might be a nonprofit or a school or an organization that's in need. We could double the results they get from the fundraising program. So you almost have a responsibility to leverage donation impact and explain to folks who are shoppers how their donation or how their purchase of, let's say, a fundraising t-shirt will make an impact and make a difference. And I'm going to give you specific ways that you can do that as we progress. Now, the last consideration here with donation impact from a science perspective, psychology tells us that by helping others, that improves our happiness. This is something known as altruism, right? It's just a human condition. Unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath, most humans take great pleasure knowing they're making an impact, knowing they're helping. And that's why you see, large marathons with huge participation, right? People want to participate and they want to help and they get pleasure from that. It's just part of the human condition. So here's the key takeaways from donation impact. Again, what the research and the science and data tells us about donation impact. We must be explicit and specific. So if you're launching an online fundraiser and you're putting messaging together as part of the fundraising component in an InkSoft online store, you want to use the headline, the subheadline, and the messaging to say specifically your purchase, whatever percentage you might be applying as a donation mechanism or whatever dollar amount, your purchase will help fund and give very specific examples. Purchase new equipment, will help subsidize travel and uniform expense for the team to help those families that are in need. So again, we must use marketing messaging to be explicit and specific. And there's a few other subtle ways to do that, as I'll show you as we progress. Now think about leveraging the fundraising component as I've just mentioned. Another very simple way to reinforce donation impact is to use personalized follow-ups. And you can use custom thank you messaging in the InkSoft checkout, and I'll show you how to do that as we progress. You can also customize messaging on packing slips. So if you're in the habit of printing off packing slips from every order and including that in the outgoing packaging, it's a great opportunity to add extra messaging. In fact, you can have that messaging sort of printed on the packing slip, but you might want to circle it and maybe put a personalized thank you message and maybe sign your name. It's not uncommon. In fact, I oftentimes will get something from a merchant. In fact, one of my new favorite coffee roasters, I believe they're out of somewhere in Pennsylvania. It's Happy Mug. And here's a quick shout out to Happy Mug. Their Bigfoot espresso blend is absolutely amazing. But every time I place an order, I get of course, in the poly bag, I open it up, and there's the invoice, right, serving as the packing slip. There's always a custom thank you message, and it's always signed. So it's just a human little touch and texture. But I'll show you how you can reinforce donation impact through custom messaging at checkout, and of course, custom messaging on packing slips, which all can be customized inside of InkSoft. All right, let's go on to motivation as part of the dime fundraising sort of methodology. So let's kind of do an exploration here. What does motivation really mean? So we know people will be more likely to give or participate in a fundraiser when that fundraiser, maybe the cause, the organization, the messaging, specifically aligns with their motivations. And by motivations, we mean things like core values, beliefs, maybe their goals, their aspirations. And if we look at the political climate in the US and even globally, it's never been so partisan, right? And so we can use that as a micro example of how people, when they're convicted, they really will dig in to support, their belief systems and their goals, right? So today's consumer more than ever, wants to purchase products from a company that, again, shares their belief system, right? So if I really care strongly about maybe, environmental causes, right? Global warming or recycling, or, I'm going to probably, sort of prioritize purchases from companies that share those same motivations, right? So we want symmetry. So with that said, we know from science and data, and we know from clear examples, again, that we're experiencing in the media and in our own country with politics, people are more likely to be involved or vested when there's alignment with their motivations, their belief systems, and their goals. So let's take another sort of look at motivation. And I think this is a very meaningful, and it actually surprised me in terms of the research. But, so there's two key ways people are motivated: by self-interest or by altruistic motivations. And we already talked about altruism, right? That's the value we get, sort of the human condition of just taking pleasure in helping, right? So with that said, research tells us that people are more likely to give and participate in a fundraiser when there's alignment with altruism compared to self-interest. So if you did an online fundraiser and said your purchase, $15 from your purchase will go to help support this school or this organization, and you can use that as a tax write-off. Well, that's going to get less, impact and less results compared to, again, talking about the specific value of your participation on this student or this student body or this class or this group. So again, research moreover, research also tells us that we should focus on one set of motivations, not multiple. So it may be tempting, and this is where I was surprised, might be tempting to say, hey, your donation is going to help this specific group in these specific ways. Oh, and by the way, you can also use this as a tax deduction. So the research tells us that actually is going to negatively impact our fundraising results. So that said, you want to focus on altruism, and you want to focus on one motivation, right? So rather than trying to attack or align with every core value and every belief system, you want to focus on the most important. All right, so let's look at takeaways from motivation. So the first thing, which seems pretty obvious, but I think this gets neglected, is do some basic research and understand the audience in which you'll be marketing to. So if a customer comes to you, maybe they're the director of a nonprofit, and they need you to launch a fundraising store in support of their organization, you must do your due diligence and research and ask a ton of questions from that director. Tell me about the audience that we're going to be offering these products to. What gets them excited? What are the trigger words or the keywords we ought to use? Tell us about your belief system and core values. So again, if I'm charged as a marketer setting up an online store for fundraising, I need to understand the audience in which I'm marketing to get, again, the marketing copy squared away and ensure that I'm really leveraging and harnessing this notion of motivation, right? At the same time, donation impact. If I don't understand clearly what the mission of this fundraiser is, how can I inform people specifically and explicitly the value of their fundraising contribution or participation? Alrighty, clear communication, of course, is always critical, right? So we must communicate clearly to create that alignment, right? To leverage motivation. So we'll talk about this as we progress today, but really this is your opportunity to sharpen your copywriting skills by ensuring that if I understand the audience, I must connect with that audience through marketing messaging. And that's true of all marketing, right? All right, well, let's talk about the third and final component of the DIME framework before we get into social proofing and best practices. So this was another interesting thing that I discovered while doing research for this webinar, that donors derive value and more meaning from their donation involvement and their participation in a fundraiser when they believe that there's a personal cost, when there's effort that's involved. So this really surprised the heck out of me. You would think that folks would want path of least resistance, but they actually want to be more involved and more vested with fundraising because, again, I think that heightens this notion of altruism, right? If it's easy, there's no personal sacrifice, then really there's not much value, right? So the reality is effort also tells us that people prefer to donate when it's more difficult for them to do so. And let me give you some examples of that really, I think, reinforce this notion of effort. Let's look at the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? Rather than just giving money or the ALS organization just simply soliciting for donations, financial contributions, the challenge was to fill up a bucket of ice water and dump it on yourself, right? That was a bit more effortful and involved. Secondly, the other part of this Ice Bucket Challenge was to invoke and challenge somebody else in your community, right? And you had to record this process. You had to go to social media and call somebody out specifically. There was an effort involved, which is much different than just making a financial donation, right? Let's look at marathons and 5Ks. All right, people will run and participate in a physical, endurance and exercise, as part of maybe participating in a fundraiser, so that they might be paying an entry fee to a 5K. That entry fee goes to raise money for the organization, but then they're also investing time and physical effort again to get more meaning from their contribution. I also read an interesting study where there was an ice bucket filled with ice water, and volunteers were asked to submerge their hand in ice water, which isn't necessarily pleasant, especially long term. And there was a relationship to the length of time that your hand was submerged in the ice water to the financial donation you were going to make. So let's say that it was $1 per minute. So the longer I submerged my hand, the greater my donation would be. That fared greater compared to just soliciting folks for donations, right? So again, effort tells us we must ask consumers to be a bit more involved in the fundraiser. And I'm going to give you very specific ways that you can do this, which are going to help amplify your sales results, your revenue results, and your fundraising results. All right, so let's do a takeaway from effort. Consider integrating additional efforts into your fundraising programs and your messaging. And let me give you some really simple examples. Think about things like activity add-ins. Maybe you'll ask somebody, hey, when you receive your t-shirt or your decorated products, will you wear those products and take a selfie and take to social media and use X hashtag? Will you also invite people, in your social community to make a purchase to help support this great cause and this great organization? Will you purchase an additional product and give it as a gift? So things like, a strong call to action or call to arms, and soliciting a one more sell opportunity, referring folks, asking for promotions and sharing on social media. So again, there's some really simple ways that you can leverage this notion of effort to get extra value for fundraising. All right, so let's go into social proofing. This is an important consideration, and I'll show you how inside of InkSoft online stores, you can leverage the heck out of social proofing to get better fundraising results. So let's take a look at this notion of social proofing. So this was popularized by a Arizona State University professor, Robert Colladini, and he's a professor of psychology. And I had the great pleasure of seeing him speak once, and he absolutely blew my mind. So Professor Colladini is really known for being an expert in persuasion, the psychology of human persuasion, right? So Robert Colladini had developed this theory of social proof, which explains that people look to other consumers or other people maybe in their social network when making certain decisions. So think about, we see this all the time, right? Hey, I'm looking to invest in a new screen printing, automatic screen printing press. Can anybody make a recommendation? I see this all the time on industry forums, right? So social proofing says, hey, if I can get feedback from others, it reduces the potential negatives, right? It reduces the harm and the risk because other people that I might trust in my social sphere can validate something. So social proof is a strong thing that really goes back to our primal brain, right? The herd theory. If others are doing it, it must be safe, right? And we see this again in examples of animals, right? When one antelope raises their head and twitches their ears in alarm, the rest do. And when one sprints to take action to flee from fear, well, the balance of the herd does the same. Now, social proofing, to give a bit more context here, is really the psychological preference for doing what other people are doing. And look at fashion trends, right? Look at this notion of how marketers are leveraging influencers on social media. If Kim Kardashian is validating for this line of makeup, well, then it must be great, right? So again, social proofing is really maximized in social media, right? Because that's where we as humans will tend to socialize. So the reality is, if other people are doing it or involved or invested, well, it proves that it must be worthwhile or somehow validated. Now, this goes back to the sort of, this notion of consensus and herd theory, right? And consensus says that if a majority of people agree, then there's safety, right? There's less risk or fear. This goes back to, again, the flight or fight, notion of the primal human brain. So really important and really effective marketing techniques, again, social proofing. And here's how you can take it away. And I'll show you again some specific examples in online stores of how you can leverage the heck out of social proofing. And we'll talk about something known as the raw quantity method of social proofing, where you actually use hard numbers like fundraising numbers. This is how many people have purchased. This is how many units sold. This is how much money has been raised. So that sort of validates that, hey, other people are participating in this fundraiser. It must be worthwhile. The other consideration is using testimonials and endorsements to support social proofing. This is a super easy technique, and I'll show you how you can do that using InkSoft online stores. Okay, so let's talk about raw quantity, right, as part of social proofing. So here on screen is an example of an InkSoft-powered online fundraising store, and this is the fundraising component. And you can see support the Eagles. So a headline, you can see right below that some subtext. So this is where you, again, need to be a savvy marketing copywriter, and you need to appeal with a very specific donation impact message. Your support will help in these specific ways. And I would also underscore specific and important or meaningful ways and be very clear on the reality of that. But in terms of raw quantity and social proofing, you can see inside of InkSoft, you can either use a dollar amount raised, so in this case, $24,000 raised of the goal, or you can use units sold. Let's say that our goal is to sell 1,000 products or 1,000 units, and we're 552 units towards our goal. So that's using the notion of raw quantity to express to consumers that, hey, other people are participating, you should too. So that's a strong motivator and driver of behavior in the way of social proofing. And I'll give you another example of the testimonial and endorsement as we progress here. So here's an example of testimonial and endorsement. You can see here the Eagles need your help. Together we can ensure the Eagles athletic program succeeds. Our student athletes are counting on your help. So here's a quote from Coach Allen, the Eagles athletic director. And so think about, looking to who is the leader, who is the influencer, who is maybe a social maven of this program, of this group, of this nonprofit, and can you use that person to give a strong endorsement and statement about the value of this fundraiser, the donation impact this fundraiser will have, why people should be a participant. So again, every group, every organization, if you're doing a fundraiser for maybe a team or a club, an athletic club that's trying to raise money to subsidize uniform and equipment expense, Coach is a fixture of that organization, right, of that tribe. Coach is influential on players and parents and donors and the community at large. So can you integrate them into the fundraiser in this simple way, right? So inside of InkSoft, you can use the sponsorship testimonial component, and you can put in that key messaging there, and that's going to help drive even better results. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to transition, and we're going to talk about some of the online fundraising store best practices. And this is going to be a really quick flyby of some of the technology you can use that's available in the InkSoft online store platform to really reinforce this notion of the dime fundraising model and social proofing. So let's do a quick toggle outside of the presentation, and let's actually get into the InkSoft online store framework to take a look at those best practices. Okay, so here we are inside of the InkSoft online store framework, and here's an example of the Eagle Strong fundraising store that I put together in short order. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the promo bar, which is at the very top. So inside of InkSoft, we have a component that's available in the component library. And of course, the component library is all the different very specific features that you can add to an InkSoft online store. So the promo bar is at the very top of the online store. And as the name implies, this is the ability for you to promote something important. So consumers are going to see this at the very top. It animates in after a few seconds of visiting the online store. And it's a top line call to action. It might be the very first key messaging that a consumer sees. So in this case, I can add a color. I can choose where to position the text, center, left, right, justify. And I can put in that key messaging. So promo bar can be a great way to say, hey, all hooded sweatshirts are on sale using this discount code. So you could actually promote something very specific in terms of product marketing. But more importantly, and relatedly to this notion of science-backed tips for fundraising, knowing donation impact is important and can get 2x the results. I want to lead with that donation impact messaging. We need your help. So that's a call to action. Together, we can help the Eagles athletic program succeed in these specific ways, right? So think about using donation impact at the very top of the online store to get folks sort of in the right mindset as it relates to how their contribution is going to help this organization. Now, as we scroll down, one other best practice here in terms of the hero space or using the banner component, of course, you can have different rotating or custom imagery at every online store. So think about using imagery that's going to resonate, right, with the audience. So this goes back to really researching and understanding the audience so you get the best possible results, right? So think about implementing in specific photography of the organization. Maybe it's of a specific person. Maybe it's of coach. Something visual that's going to resonate strong. The brand colors, the team colors, the identity, and again, maybe supportive background photography that's going to connect and resonate with potential donors and folks participating in the fundraiser. So be considerate of using appropriate hero space images. It's tempting to just use text, but go the extra mile, implement in specific imagery and messaging that is going to resonate. And this might be a time for you to connect with those, as we look to motivation as part of that DIME model, right? Really connecting with the core belief systems. We can do that visually, right? With visual cues. All right, as we go down, next we have the fundraising component. And as mentioned, you can either do a financial goal, you have the ability to do a units sold goal. That's a way to use raw quantity, but be very considerate of the messaging that you're using here. So again, donation impact must be reflected here. This is where you're really reinforcing the notion of raw quantity, but you're also soliciting for money. So in this case, you want to be very specific and explicit with your messaging in terms of how contributions are going to help, right? All right, so as we progress down, of course, product in terms of best practice, just like hero space and banner, you want to ensure that your whatever graphical imprints you'll be using on products are going to resonate with core values and the organization's identity. So be very contemplative to ensure that you are checking the boxes with brand colors, identity, messaging to make sure to make the best possible impact. Now, as we scroll down, let's also talk about that notion of social proofing as we discussed with testimonials and endorsements. Here you can use the component in InkSoft, which is the testimonial component where you can put in that key messaging, right? You can upload a photo of the key social maven and influencer, right? Whether it be coach or principal, or maybe it's the president of the nonprofit, CEO, whatever it might be. And again, by validating and providing that endorsement, that again reduces risk. Reduces the risk of, hey, is this a legitimate fundraising for this organization that I support? By having those strong endorsements, the answer is you can get closer to checking that box. So that brings our webinar to a conclusion. Again, this was a webinar that was focused on what science, research, and data informs us about the implications of positive fundraising results. And so the reality is, the science is meaningful because, there's so many fundraising and philanthropic organizations across the globe that are trying to make an impact or do good for whatever organization they're supporting, right? So it's only logical that there would be social scientists and professors and researchers that are exploring ways to strategically help these organizations get better results. So I read a very exciting white paper on this topic, and that was the motivation for today's webinar and blog posting. So I hope that I was able to translate that white paper into some value for you today. Now, if you're not using InkSoft to launch successful online fundraising programs, we'd certainly invite you to reach out to the InkSoft team, where we can give you a demo and provide a deep and meaningful tour of the InkSoft online store framework, which obviously extends well beyond just fundraising stores, but whether it be corporate stores, pop-up stores, password protected order fulfillment stores, there's so many different use cases for InkSoft online stores. And InkSoft leads the industry in terms of capabilities for online stores. So there's a lot of very specific features and functions that align with the needs of today's modern decorator and print shop. So by all means, if you're curious about the InkSoft platform, we'd love to share some insights with you. And the best way to do that is to reach out to the InkSoft team, and we can schedule a time to do a live one-on-one tour of the InkSoft platform. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we certainly look forward to our next web training event together.